Let me ask you something. Have you ever negotiated with yourself about drinking? Like, I don't know, I'll only drink on weekends, or I'll stop after two. Tomorrow I'll do better. For a lot of successful women, the quiet negotiation can go on for years. Today's guest lived there too. But what fascinates me about her story isn't that she just stopped drinking, it's that she eventually decided to talk about it publicly. And for a lot of people, that might be the scarier step.
If you've stepped away from drinking or the things that used to numb you, you know it changes your life. But it changes the people watching you too. You become quiet proof that something better is possible. On Sober Life Rocks, we talk with people who realize that their choice wasn't just personal, it was a platform, a chance to be a leader, to shorten somebody else's learning curve, to do something that really mattered. If you felt that pull, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay with us.
Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. Today, I am so excited to be talking with Susan Larkin. She's a coach and the co-host of Sober and Lit podcast, who helps women see that living alcohol-free isn't a restriction, it's a powerful upgrade. Susan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so good to see you. You were at Amplify Sober Voices, and so we got to meet in person. I would just love to know from you why you came and kind of what you got out of that amazing experience.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's what I'm all about, is amplifying how living an alcohol-free life is so much better than when we were drinking. And that's what why we called our podcast Sober and Lit, because we say our life is more lit now than it ever was when we were drinking. And I want to be part of this movement that is getting that message out there to the women that, like myself, that were struggling, knowing I was over drinking, knowing it wasn't serving me, but just not knowing how to get out of that. And also, I think my biggest thing was, what does that mean about me? That I have to adopt a label, or what are people going to think of me if I decide to stop drinking? So just normalizing not drinking. That's what this is all about. Normalizing that making the choice to not drink is the same as not being gluten-free or being dairy-free.
Amen.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was looking at your website, and I've gotten to know you a little bit from Amplify. One of the things that I hear you talk a lot about is this notion of the gray area drinking. And I know for me, like, I did not identify as the person who had lost it all. I was not, living under the bridge with a brown paper bag type of thing. In fact, I was quite high functioning. The wheels were beginning to come off a little bit near the end, but I still had a job. I was still a single mom, all the things. So talk to me about that whole notion of gray area drinking and how it becomes almost a trap.
Yeah. Well, so gray area drinking, that term, it came from the dietary guidelines when they were redoing them in 2010. And I learned this from Jolene Park. And then Jolene Park did her TED Talk about gray area drinking. And I think that term helps to identify people on the alcohol use spectrum between an every now and again drinker and someone who needs to go to rehab. And that's a pretty big area, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the alcohol use disorder spectrum goes from mild to moderate to severe. And so the gray area drinkers would be in the mild, moderate category. And then severe, maybe needs additional supports. But I think the trap can be that you can live there a really long time. You can, drink daily or binge drink on the weekends and then wake up the Monday morning and especially successful women, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, tell yourself you're not going to, keep doing this.
Put on extra concealer.
Put on extra makeup, get to work and put your head down, do your work. And unfortunately, a lot of times come home and have the wine that you said you were going to have at 7 a.m. when you were leaving, for work. it can just be because it's not quote unquote bad enough to do something about.
So I want to get to know you a little bit. Tell me how this looked in your life.
Kind of exactly what I just mentioned. It was, for me, my story is interesting because I noticed right away in my spirit that I was drinking more than the 7 drinks a week that they say is healthy for women. And I was aware of that. And I think those were the guidelines. And so I used to, put notes in my diary or on my calendar, 3 drinks, 4, 1, 0, and like kind of try to manage it for a really long time. But I mentioned to my pastor when I just wasn't managing it very well. Like I would say in the morning I wasn't going to drink, and then I would find myself drinking in the evening. And I thought, what is going on here? Why can't I stop doing this?
Normal people don't chart their drinking.
Right, exactly. Every now and again, drinkers don't chart their drinking. Yeah. So I asked my pastor, or I talked to my pastor's wife and said, I think maybe I'm drinking a little too much. And she was like, oh, well, if you think you're drinking too much, you probably have a problem. You should go to AA. So I was like, whoa. That was, like pretty, it seemed
That's
extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I did go to AA for about 8 months. And that was in some ways a good experience, in some ways a bad experience, because I didn't feel like I had a disease. I didn't feel like I wasn't in control, like all the things that you need to admit in order, at the beginning to do the steps, et cetera. I didn't feel like I had anyone to make amends to except maybe myself. And so I didn't quite fit in there at all. I would look around. I always say I looked around and was like, where's the people that just drank a little too much white wine? Like, I don't see my people here. And so I left AA, but then I kind of entered this empty space of, well, where do I go? How do I get any help if at that time, AA seemed like it was the way. This was in 2013. And so it's sort of like, well, I guess I just have to figure this out myself, and I'll just try harder. I'll moderate harder. I will have more rules. I will throw everything, dig my heels in and use all of the things that helped me be successful in life and in business towards this substance. And guess what? That doesn't work. Nope. I like to say all the moxie, pound the square peg into the round hole, dig your heels in, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, does not work when it comes to an addictive substance.
And that's kind of where I want to take the conversation, because I too, I looked at myself as a fairly smart person. I considered myself to be strong and independent. Yeah. And I couldn't go to the grocery store without that bottle of wine leaping into the cart without my asking it to.
Yeah.
And the term in AA is cunning, baffling, and powerful. And it is.
Yeah.
Even if you are not what you consider to be all the way down the drain, even in this gray area drinking, it still seems to baffle us.
It does. Well, I think it's a lack of information and understanding. And that's why I want to be out here talking about it. I crowned myself an alcohol awareness advocate. I just made that up. AAA, alcohol awareness advocate. And because I feel like there's so much misinformation about alcohol out there, driven by big alcohol being hidden. And, a lot of that stuff has been debunked now in the last 10, 15 years since 2013. But I didn't know any of that. Years. I just thought, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get this? I'm so successful in every area of my life. Why can't I conquer this?
So where was the turning point for you? What happened?
Well, so I would say in my life, I used alcohol to overachieve to overfunction, and to deal with stress and anxiety. I wasn't a party girl. I wasn't out there having a ton of fun with my drinking. Now, sometimes we would go to wineries and a lot of our activities were around, going out and drinking.
Yep.
Yeah. But most of my drinking, if the disordered drinking, was at home, because I could go out and just have 2 glasses of wine, but sometimes I would come home and have more. 100%. And I think that's a telltale sign of somebody who has disordered drinking by myself, have more by myself, or with my husband. We would sit on the deck and, have 1 bottle. And then I would be like, it progressed to a point where I was like, oh, can you go get another? Yeah. Or he had red wine, really the tannins in it sort of bothered me. So he would have his red wine and I would have my white wine. And you have disordered drinking if your husband starts to drink your white wine and you're feeling like, hey, that's my wine. Right?
Absolutely.
If you're calling it your wine. So, oh, shoot. I think I forgot what your question was.
Where did the turning point come from?
Oh, when was the turning point? Yes. So that progression, from 1 bottle to 2 bottles. And then I would drink my white wine and then have a few glasses of his red wine. And the progression, and because my drinking was around overfunctioning, and I was working my day job, and we bought a music studio. And so I was working at Yale University, and then I would go at night and teach voice lessons, and we would have open mic nights. And so I was basically doing 2 jobs. And when we would leave the music studio at 8 p.m., we would go have dinner at, a little pub nearby. And they had this late night happy hour where you got, 2 for 1. So I'd have these 2 ginormous, because of course they don't give you 5 ounces, I'd have these 2 ginormous glasses of wine every night. And it pretty soon that just kept escalating to where, it wasn't enough. And I was feeling terrible. So in 2019, after particularly boozy Easter, if I'm truthful, I found Sober Sis. And I know there's a lot of people that, came through the door through Sober Sis. So we thank Jen so much for her program. And this was when she first started it. So I think she started, maybe her first one was like February, and this was May. So I was in the May group. And I then felt like, oh my gosh, look at all these women, Christian women too. So I was a Christian. I also felt like, I'm so bad. Why can't I give this up for God? I was just pounding myself with negativity. And, all these women who looked like me, who sounded like me, whose drinking looked like me. It was like, oh my goodness, I found my people. So that started my journey 2019. And then I went completely sober June 1st, 2020. So it took me a year of exploring and going back and forth. And that's where that trap of that gray area drinking is. I thought, oh, if I can go 40 days, then I'm fine. And then I would drink again and maybe drink fine, quote unquote, a few times. But then because of stress or a coping mechanism, I would overdrink and then beat myself up and then put myself on another 30 days. So it was almost like punishment versus, and that's not good either. But I learned a lot in 2019, though, back and forth. And then during COVID, I went back, not forth, to, everybody. It was crazy. This pandemic, my job was very stressful. We were trying to put the entire medical school curriculum on Zoom to keep it going. We're all working from home. I had to go into the office and put together like the PPE things for the students. And we're all like panicking and, we're washing our groceries and leaving our mail in the garage. It was very stressful. It's hard to even remember and fathom that. And so I was drinking, every afternoon in the backyard just because, And the difference though of going back to drinking on a daily-ish basis from the whole 2019 when I took so many breaks, I just noticed, number one, my drinking went very quickly to as much or more than before. And I felt so awful. I felt so depressed and just awful that it showed me how much better I felt when I wasn't drinking. And I just was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. That's what happened. I woke up one morning just feeling like, oh, I hate myself. I hate my life. And just had this realization of like, wait a minute, you only get one life. And I don't want to live like this anymore. And I don't want to hate myself anymore. So I really have to do something about this. And I knew I needed to stop. So
now, you talk today a lot about the nervous system regulation, and I so relate to your story about doing this to cope with the stress, to be more high performing. Like if you had my life, you would drink too. And to do it to celebrate, like to do it, it was all a reward or a comfort system for me.
yeah.
And so I remember talking to the interventionist that my parents gifted me with and saying, but you don't, you're talking about taking away my one coping skill. Like none of these outside things are going to change when I stop drinking, but now I'm going to not have any way to cope with it. How is that going to work?
Exactly. It's
So
not.
talk to me about the whole nervous system regulation and how that comes into play.
Yeah. So it's so important. I love how you put that. I talk to my clients about, yes, it's like taking a blankie away from a child and your limbic brain. I use the Dan Sullivan model of your brain. So this is your amygdala, which is, your survivor brain, and your limbic brain is your emotions, or I call it your baby Susan. And then adult Susan is your prefrontal cortex. And when it's in charge, you're making the decisions you want to make. But then we get triggered by stress or anxiety or whatever. And our limbic baby is like, and our survivor brain is like, drink wine. That's what we've always done. When you're not, when you're dysregulated and you're not thinking straight, your brain, your lid is flipped. That's what Dan Sullivan says. So we need ways to get our nervous system back on. So our lid goes back down and we make the decisions that we want to make, but also we feel better, right? We don't want to quit drinking and then just be, like you said, hanging out there like this raw nerve, white knuckling life. So we want to have ways to feel better that aren't alcohol. And
for instance,
and it sounds crazy and people always give me the stink eye, but breathing, breath work. I know I talk to clients and they look at me like, girl, breath work is not going to help me when I'm having a panic attack. But then they try it and they're like, oh my gosh, that worked. I feel so much better. So doing, and this is something I've been talking about recently on our podcast and also in my newsletter for my newsletter community, is giving them some of these tools. So I usually start clients out with a 2x breath because it's really easy. You can remember it and you can do it anywhere, which is breathe in like to the count of 3 or 4 and out for 2 times that. So the count of 6 or 8, and do that 4 times and just see how you feel. And then I usually graduate to the VOO breath, which is where you breathe in and you do the VOO, really low as possible. Sounds like a foghorn. And do that, for a minute, 2 minutes. And that tones your vagus nerve too, which is all this regulation happens up and down your polyvagal system, which is your vagus nerve. So having a toned vagus nerve helps you go in and out of these states more easily, or just, yeah. So it's breath work, but also it's other, a way to calm your nervous system. Sunshine, going out in nature, putting your feet in the grass is a grounding tool. And what I suggest is we try 1 or 2 things. And then the client tells me, what are they noticing? How do they feel? What is working for you? And we just keep experimenting until you have a whole quiver or table of tools that you can use to regulate your nervous system, to deal with stress, to complete the stress cycle, to deal with anxiety, all the things that you used alcohol for. I don't want you to be stuck with no tool.
I remember I had a podcast guest on last year, I think, Esther Avant, and she works with people with eating disorders as well as other, addictive things. And one of the things she said that struck me so much was that she works with clients on some of these types of behaviors before they stop the behavior, before they stop the addictive substance,
Yes.
so that we aren't in shock.
Yeah.
So take that to drinking. Like if we learn some of these breathing techniques, if we learn some of these nervous system regulations while we're still drinking, then it isn't completely new to our body, and our body recognizes, oh, this is a calming moment. How do you feel about that?
Well, my program that I have in my coaching is called Freedom Formula. It's 8 weeks. And the first 2 weeks are exactly that. We learn about what alcohol does to your brain and body. We learn some tools so that when you do start a break, you actually have some tools to use that you've tried and practiced with. So yes, I completely agree with that. And we actually had somebody on our podcast that was a meditation teacher, and he talked about how he stopped drinking after he learned to meditate, because once he learned to meditate, he no longer had the need or desire, or didn't even fit in with his values to drink anymore. So yes, it can work both ways. It definitely, I think that some of the tools don't work as well if you're still putting alcohol in your body. And so you really do have to take a break, at some point and use the tools. So, but learning them ahead of time.
Wand, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Learning them ahead of time is great, because I like to talk about this abundant table of abundance. I want you to have abundant things and pleasurable things to do instead of drinking. Because again, if you are left with no tools, like I was liking this, like you have your, abundance table or your tool belt. If you pull out a tool and you've never used it before, and you're you're dysregulated, you're just going to throw that away and grab the tool that works, which is alcohol. So you want to practice these tools maybe when you're not completely so dysregulated, so you know how to use them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I often talk to people about the idea of, I'm a gardener. I love to garden.
And yeah, me too.
So when you have a patch that you want to start to develop, and you pull all the weeds and then you leave it for a period of time, what happens?
The weeds grow back. I know. Back. Yeah.
But if you spend all that time weeding and then immediately plant enough things that they kind of cover a decent amount of the ground, what happens?
Beautiful garden and less weeds.
A few weeds come back, for sure. But that's not what is predominating.
Right.
And so I look at that across all aspects of our lives, that if all we're doing is taking away the negative, but we're not replacing it with something positive, the negative just crops right back again.
Absolutely.
And it's overwhelming to then, that whole thing I just did was for nothing.
Yes. Yeah.
But to have a few weeds, it's like, that's manageable. And I get the joy of watching the beautiful things start to grow.
Yes. And that's so enjoyable. It's so funny because I did a program last spring called Nourish to Thrive. And this was for people who are either newly sober or even still working on it. And it was all of these tools. And we talked about, and I just made this up on the fly, but I was talking about our pleasure garden where we want to have everything that we're putting into our life be pleasurable. And it was funny because everyone was like, this sounds a little X-rated, Susan, pleasure garden. Like, I don't think we should Google that. And I'm like, we just had a good laugh over that because awesome. It was pretty funny. But yeah, planting things in your life that are enjoyable, that you love, and that feel good. Yeah.
Now, the last thing I wanted to ask you about is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I was mostly a secret drinker. Like you, I would, have a glass or two in company, but then scurry home because I wanted to drink the way I wanted to drink. And so also I got sober in 2005 when the whole world really had heavy stigma around problem drinkers or alcoholics. And so I used that same skill that I developed at hiding my drinking to now hide my sobriety. And in fact, I didn't tell anybody for 18 and a half years. And so, other than in my sobriety community. And so I look at anybody who shares their sober choices out loud with great admiration because it's scary. Even in today's world, even as much as things have changed, I still talk to people all the time who say, I don't want my boss finding out. I don't want my friends finding out. I don't want the kids' parents in my carpool to know. So I want to know how it was for you when you got sober and how did you navigate that? And then how did you become this person now who has a podcast and is a coach and, has it all out there?
Yeah, well, it's sometimes still uncomfortable. My daughter is getting married and I'm meeting his family. And sometimes it is uncomfortable, especially when most of the people in your world for a few years now have known that I don't drink. Then when new people that come in, it's like kind of, oh yeah, going through that thing again. But I remember, because part of my story was AA and hiding my drinking. Then when I went back to drinking, I was hiding my drinking. I was hiding that I wasn't drinking at first. Like I would go to meetings super far away. And that's an additional time suck there when you're a busy, high achieving woman. Now I'm like driving 30 minutes to go to meetings. So that was, I was hiding that I wasn't drinking. Then I was hiding that I was drinking. And then when I finally got sober, I'm like, I can't hide anymore. That's the other thing, that shame, that was the thing that changed for me was this idea of, and this came from Annie Grace, and I eventually became a This Naked Mind coach, is she said, you are normal. Your brain is doing what it normally would do around an addictive substance, just like smoking. Alcohol is an addictive substance and your brain and body are acting normally. And that just freed me because I kept trying to get back to being normal. And that's an AA thing, a normie or somebody who has a problem with alcohol. That's very, black and white. And it's not that. It's an alcohol use disorder. It's on a spectrum. And you decide when you want to step off that spectrum. And so for me also, and I do this with my clients, is you get to decide what you tell people. You get to decide. Now, my story is way out there because on my podcast, I pretty much share all the gory details. But with clients, I'm like, you don't need to wait for them to worry what they're going to think about you. You tell them what to think. So in the beginning, for me too, even going and seeing my family, because I didn't see them until I was about a year and a half sober because of COVID. So, then I'm showing up at Christmas and Susan's not drinking, And so I had to tell them, why am I not drinking? And I call it an elevator pitch, and that's what I work on with my clients I stopped drinking during, I was drinking too much during COVID. I stopped drinking and I feel so much better. My anxiety and depression are so much better that, I just am choosing to live an alcohol-free lifestyle. And that's what I chose to tell people. And I just kept practicing that until it rolled off the tip of my tongue. And with different people, I would share more details. But that was pretty much, and that's true.
And how was that received?
Very well. A few like, oh yeah, I should probably stop too. A few like forever, my brother and that's where this is sort of my tagline is it's a choosing not to drink is a lifestyle, not a life sentence. And my brother was asking me about this when we were on a vacation. And that's what came out of my mouth. I go, choosing not to drink is a lifestyle. But when I felt like when I went to AA, it felt like a life sentence. Right. Mm-hmm. And so just really changing the narrative around that. But then I was interviewed by Annie Grace on her podcast, the This Naked Mind podcast. And I don't know if you know the term was coined by Brene Brown as a vulnerability hangover. So I shared my story and she asked me a few probing questions and we got kind of deep. And afterwards, I cried for a week. I had such a vulnerability hangover. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is like out in the world. And this is crazy. And I posted a little bit on Facebook, Not much. Yeah. I mean, the first time I posted on Facebook, I thought I was going to have a major anxiety attack. I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, it was scary. It really was scary. You don't know. It's your body is seeing it as as a survival thing. You know what I mean? Like, am I going to be thrown out of the tribe here, of the humanity tribe? Am I going to be judged? Fortunately, I wasn't. Most people are like, that's great, good for you. And if they were judging me, I didn't hear about it. But yeah, that vulnerability hangover is a real thing. But once you keep talking about it, once you keep telling people, the relief from the shame, bringing it out into the light, it crushes it, and you just get out from under that shame little black cloud, and the sunshine comes in, and it feels so good just to not hide anymore.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And there are still those who I see their little like body reaction of, the judgment
Yeah.
or the like, I wonder what they had, why they had to do this. Like, I still see that. I don't hear verbally as much as I used to. But what's so interesting is that in the past, before I was public, I imagined that that would be everybody and would cast all the shame and blame on me. And what's happened is that instead, because 95% of the people who I interact with, the reaction is positive, then they actually become the outliers. They actually become the ones that I look at and go, huh, I wonder what that's about.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it could be two things. It could be the mirror effect, where you're a mirror to them, and they're like, oh, and they don't want to admit that they're in the denial phase. And
Yeah,
that's where I was for a long time. Or it could be that they just don't have a problem with alcohol and they don't get it. And they're just not educated as well. They don't understand that it's not a binary. You either don't have a problem or you do, that it's a spectrum. And that's where education and getting the word out about that is so important. And so that's why I want to do the work that I'm doing, being out there saying, let's
absolutely.
normalize not drinking. It's not that big a deal, people, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you opened up talking about the idea that this is no different than choosing gluten-free or vegetarian. I mean, I remember, Susan, when I go to conferences all the time, and I have for most of my career, and I remember we would go to these banquet dinners, and I would see over on the side table a line of like four plates with the cloches over top of them, and the people having to do the walk of shame over to go get their little vegetarian meal and bring it back, and opening it up, and it was some kind of like pile of steamed vegetables.
Yeah.
That's how it used to be for people who ordered vegetarian. And today, there are so many more options. And in fact, I'm not vegetarian, but oftentimes I'll order that because it's so delicious.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. In
And
fact,
my,
you are seen as, what would the word be? Just being wrong or not inclusive if you don't have a vegetarian option now. It's very
a
frowned
delicious one.
upon, right? Yeah, it'd be like, oh my gosh, you're not being inclusive to everyone. And so I'm hoping we can get to that place with alcohol-free beverages that aren't juice, or Diet Coke, but not that I don't like juice or Diet Coke, but just where you can also have something fun and fancy in your glass, just like everyone else, and not be the person, not do the walk of shame over to get your special dinner, around
1,000%.
alcohol as well. But yeah, and I think we are headed that way.
And that perhaps we can move the world to a place where the only currency of connection isn't at the bar.
Yes.
That
Yes.
we learn how to do things that build networking and are inclusive, that don't have anything to do with an evening bar. So that
And yeah, for
everybody can be
everyone.
networking, and everybody can be having fun, and everybody can be getting to know each other in an unpressurized, not work setting. that doesn't just revolve around booze.
Yeah. Yeah. That wasn't my circle that much at work, working for a medical school. I mean, there was alcohol at different events and stuff, but it wasn't the same as some of the things that like weddings or other things that sometimes you do revolve around the alcohol. And so in other cultures, going to Spain, although they have they have alcohol-free beer usually on every menu. They didn't have any kind of alcohol-free wine, and just plunking a bottle of red wine on every table was the norm. And so navigating some of those things has been tricky, but I just brought my own. I have my own purse wine. I just bring my own and pour some in my glass under the table. I'm kind of a little bit bold about it. If you don't have an alcohol-free wine option, I don't even want to pay a corking fee. I shouldn't have to if you don't offer it, and most of the time I haven't had to. So, yeah.
Susan, I want to take you back to that woman who was negotiating with herself when you were in that place of, I'll do better tomorrow. What would you say to her today, knowing what you now know?
Well, maybe choosing not to drink is a lifestyle, not a life sentence. And I mean, just the information that I just didn't know, thinking I had a problem, that no, your brain is normal in reaction to an addictive substance, but we're not taught alcohol is an addictive substance. Even my husband has said that to me a couple of times. He's like, how come we never learn about this? And oh, you're going to die when I tell you this. My town DARE program was having a happy hour fundraiser. That's how not aware we are that alcohol is a drug, right? Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, everyone says, I wish I had done this sooner. I wish it hadn't taken me from 2013 to 2020. But your time is your time, when you're ready. And yeah, I wish we had programs back in 2013 that we have now, because then I would have gotten free sooner, but we didn't. And so, yeah, now I'm part of hopefully helping others get free.
Well, I've loved listening to you talk about how you work with clients. So if anybody is listening to this and would love to connect with you, what are the best ways?
You can find me on Instagram at Drink Less with Susan, or my website, which is Susan Larkin Coaching, Larkin. And you can find me there. You can email me at Susan Larkin Coaching. I would love to connect with you. Just find me, DM me, and yeah, let's chat. That's how I started.
And we'll have all of that in the podcast notes as well.
Oh, so great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Or listen to my podcast, Sober and Lit. Yeah, that's absolutely a great way to get to know me and all my stories, because I usually don't hold back much. So,
I love that. Susan, I've absolutely loved this conversation. And if there's one thing that I kind of took away from it, it was this notion that our brains, our nervous system, is wired to protect us. And we get to put in some of the inputs as to what protect us. And that can cross across all parts of our life. Even talking about the idea of going public with our choice not to drink or to drink less wherever you are in your journey, breathing through that fear and taking care of your nervous system through that fear. Because we can either be a victim of our nervous system or we can be in charge of our nervous system. So thank you for that piece of the conversation.
Oh, you're welcome. And it starts small. You don't have to get a billboard. Tell one friend, then tell another friend, and just and do it in baby steps, regulating your nervous system. And again, you get to decide what you tell. Create your elevator pitch and practice it. And take baby steps.
Love that. So if this conversation resonated with you, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week on the Sober Life Rocks podcast, we talk with people who've stepped away from alcohol or other numbing habits and discovered that choice could become something bigger than they ever expected. Not a stage, not a platform, but a chance to live your truth out loud and shorten somebody else's learning curve. And if someone comes to mind while you were listening, send them this episode. They may thank you, because sometimes it's the most powerful thing we can do is simply let somebody else know what's possible. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.